Hey, how you doing? And welcome to NLP Talks with Laura Evans, a podcast for people looking to unleash their potential in business and life. I'm Laura Evans, international trainer of NLP and host for this podcast. Join me in Series 2 for a magical insight into the training room, learn about NLP and hear firsthand from our students about how NLP is changing their lives. Stay tuned. Hey, how you doing? Thanks for listening. My name is Laura Evans and it's my pleasure to welcome you to NLP Talks with Laura Evans. I'm the founder and lead trainer at Unleash Your Potential and of course, your host for this podcast series. Now, today we're talking about fears and phobias. Does a past experience you've had make you fearful? Perhaps you are one of the 5 million people in the UK that have a phobia. Or do you just struggle with having to run your life around those fears and phobias? Well, today we're going to be sharing all about how life doesn't need to be this way. So let's get started. So in NLP, we have a technique called the Fast Phobia Model, and it is highly effective at getting rid of phobias. It's what we call a submodality technique, and you've heard me talk about that in episode 2 and 3 already. And it allows a client to get rid of a phobia in about 20 minutes. Now, don't be fooled though by the title, because the Fast Phobia Model is also used for a lot of other things. I've very successfully helped people get rid of PTSD and also helped people to let go of some of the traumatic experiences from their past using this technique. It's what we call a dissociative technique. Now, you'll have heard me talk about in a previous episode in one of the exercises about how we can change from looking through our own eyes at something as opposed to seeing us in the picture. And if you don't remember that, go back and listen to the previous episodes here in series 2. And when we are looking through our own eyes at something, when we're working with internal representations from the unconscious mind, those symbols that sit in the unconscious mind, then when we are looking through our own eyes, we're what we call associated. And when you're associated, you can feel the feelings of that memory. And it's like you are literally there looking through your own eyes, seeing things, hearing things, feeling things as you go. Now, the opposite of that is what we call disassociated. And that would be an internal representation or a memory or a picture that you're working with, where you see yourself in the picture. And so what that means is that it's like being one step removed. So it's like you're sat in the back row of a cinema watching that video play out in front of you on the screen in front of you, but you're not in it. You're kind of a bystander watching it. And this is why this technique works so well, because this process works on that technique, as in disassociating people, putting some distance between them. Now, traditionally, if somebody had a phobia, they would use the traditional method of what they call exposure. So if I didn't have NLP and you came to me as a therapist and I was trained in this technique, what I would do is, if you said you had a spider phobia, for example, which is very common, I'd bring you here into the room and we'd have a bit of a chat about the problem that you have. And then what we would do is start to slowly expose you to the thing that you're fearful of. So we go from sitting in here, and then maybe I bring a spider in here in a nice safe way, in a nice container that's not going to get out. And slowly, I expose you to it. And let's say, I don't know, tarantula or something. And we get to the point of you being able to have it on the table next to your hand or something. Now, if you've ever had exposure therapy or that kind of method, you will know, and you can, even if you haven't, you can probably imagine how traumatic that would be for someone. I mean, I used to have a snake phobia, and I know exactly where that phobia came from. My uncle used to keep snakes. And I remember one day running into the house where he was, so excited to tell him about what I'd been up to. And I ran down the hall from the front door, flung open the lounge, and went, Uncle Frankie. And there it was, lying in the middle of the floor in the lounge, loose out of its cage, container, whatever you want to call it, was this snake. I spun on my tail, I screamed the house down, ran out, and never ever did I go back in that house. Whenever we went to Uncle Frankie's house, I used to sit in the car outside and I'd have my sandwich and my glass of squash in the car and I would not leave the car. So I know exactly where it came from. Now, traditional exposure therapy would be like, okay, well, maybe let's take Laura to a zoo. Let's take her outside the reptile area and let's maybe gradually expose her. And I'm just like, when I had that phobia, no way you would have got me to do that. Absolutely no way. Because it's just the thought of it's too scary. And the good news is with the fast phobia model is we do not do any of that. Absolutely not. The item is nowhere near the person when we deal with it. And it's very comfortable. And it's an easy way to actually do it. And it's really fast. I mean, 20 minutes is all it takes. I mean, I'd had that snake phobia for years, absolutely years, until I got rid of it. Now, most people that have a phobia know at some level that it's an irrational fear. So, for example, I know that there isn't going to be a snake that just kind of appears from nowhere where I'm sitting here today recording this for you. I know that. But if I had a snake phobia and I thought there was even a chance of it, I'd be on guard. My heart would be racing. My breathing would be all over the place. And I know actually it's not really going to happen. And actually, I can be perfectly safe. So, if you take some of the other phobias, and there's lots of them, and they all have weird and wonderful names. And I don't know the technical names, I'll be honest with you. But if you take some of the maybe more unusual phobias, you can have a phobia of buttons. Now, that's actually more common than you might think, but phobia of buttons. And that might mean that I can't do up my shirt because I can't touch buttons. And I know that's irrational, and I know the button can't hurt me. But actually, from a phobia point of view, I just can't bring myself to do it. I remember in the NLP practitioner course, we had one of our delegates that had a phobia of baked beans. Yes, you heard me right, baked beans. And actually, when we got to the crux of what the problem was, it wasn't the beans themselves. It was what in her words, she called the bean juice. And I'll never forget working with her, helping her get through it. But she knew it was irrational. So phobias are often described as irrational fears, but they screw up people's lives. I remember one of our delegates worked with someone he knew, and she had a fear of bridges. Now, I live in Wales in the UK, and there's a lot of valleys in Wales. And if you need to go to the supermarket and it's the other side of the valley and you need to go over the bridge, but you have a bridge phobia, that could add an hour to an hour and a half on your journey in some of the valleys. And that's really difficult. And he helped her to get rid of that. One of our students, who I won't name, but one of our students, and she'll know who she is when she listens to this, lived in Bristol, which for those of you that don't know, Bristol's only about half an hour, 40 minutes away from Cardiff, where we train. And she had a bridge phobia, and she came over the Severn Bridge, which is a massive bridge over the River Severn. And she said to me, I was so scared of the bridge, I sat in the middle lane doing 40 miles an hour. And I'm thinking, well, if I'd been behind you, you'd have really annoyed me. But she was like, and that's the only way that I could do it. So phobias are very, very common. We say that in the UK alone, there's about 5 million people that have phobias, and they're very, very common. Now, I've said that the fast phobia model is good for other things, not just phobias. And that's absolutely true. There are lots of people that unfortunately have had traumatic experiences in their life to date and have therefore traumatic memories that caused them a problem. And I'll never forget a guy that I had come to train with me in Cardiff, and he was from Ghana, and he flew all the way over from Ghana to come and train with me. And we got to run the fast phobia model, and he said, I don't particularly want to tell you what the trauma is, but I'd really like to get rid of it. And that's one of the beautiful things about NLP. It's content free. I don't need to know. In fact, I don't really want to know the ins and outs of all these traumas that people have had, but I do want to be able to help them. And so we ran the fast phobia model, and I literally saw him change in front of me. I had no idea what we were working on, but literally changed in front of me and got rid of it. And he was so relieved at the end. And he said, would you mind, Laura, if I told you what it was? And I said, well, no, I mean, if you would like to tell me, that's absolutely fine. And it was really sad story because he had seen one of his best friends shot in front of him. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what that must have been like. And he said, I have night terrors. I wake up in the night. He said it screwed my life up. And he said, and now I can talk about it. And I couldn't have told you that earlier on. And it's just amazing to be able to help. And I don't wish to trigger any of my listeners that are listening to this. I'm not going to give you lots of examples of traumas, but you know the kind of thing I'm talking about. Very, very successful for those as well. Now, where do these phobias come from, or where do these traumatic memories come from? Well, generally they come from what we call significant emotional events. And the clues in the title, folks. It's an event which is significantly emotional. So there's no prizes for working out what that one is. And this is where the client experiences something where two factors are at play. One is there is a significant change in state. So they go from being very relaxed or calm to very quickly becoming maybe terrified. Okay, so the extent of the change, the shift in emotion is big, but also the speed at which it changes also is part of the problem. If you think about my snake phobia, I went from being very excited running down the corridor to see Uncle Frankie to in a split second when I opened that door to being absolutely terrified and running the other way. Those are the kinds of events that are significant enough that they will potentially cause people problems, sufficient that they might install a fear or a phobia, because our neurology just doesn't have the time to adjust. Now, it's relatively easy, as I've said, 20 minutes to help someone with that. And it's such a relief for people that have that phobia, who have that trauma, that know that we can really help them very quickly, very, very effectively. It's what's called the Fast Phobia Model, because of how quickly we can help people. No exposure, no need to tell me about the trauma of the event, but I can absolutely help you with it. So it's hugely, hugely impactful. Now, how does it work? Well, it involves us running a movie. So if I take, for example, my snake phobia, I know exactly where my snake phobia came from, as I've told you. And so what we can do is run the movie of that particular event in my mind in a particular way, which basically means that we rub off the negative emotions, or kinesthetics as we would call them in NLP, but we rub those emotions off. We don't delete the memory, but what we do is take those negative emotions off the movie. What that therefore means is that memory can be just filed away in the unconscious mind, just like all the others that aren't significant. And it just gets filed away in the filing cabinet, just like the rest, and it just kind of disappears. It therefore doesn't play on your mind in quite the same way. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Inside Out, and if you haven't, go and watch it. It's brilliant. I love it. But if you have watched Inside Out, what you'll know, and it's a great analogy, is this young girl has to move county or city with her family, and it's all about how her mind works. And she has all these what look like 10-pin bowling balls, to be quite honest, on the movie. And every little ball represents a memory. And most of them just get filed away. They're not significant, particularly positive or negatively. They just get filed away in this great big warehouse where all these memories sit, which we would call our unconscious mind. But there are some memories or some balls that have such significant emotions, positive or negative, they get treated differently. And this is what happens with the fast phobia. So we take those more significant metaphorical balls, if you like, memories, and we just rub those negative emotions off so it can just be filed away with the rest. And like I say, it then doesn't play such a problem for you on a day-to-day basis. So what I'd like to do is give you an experience of what it might be like to run a movie. Now, we're not going to run the Fast Phobia Model. That wouldn't be ethical or right for me to do on a podcast episode. I'd want you here with me so I could make sure that we did this in a very safe and very comfortable way. But I'm just going to get you to run a movie in your head just so that you can experience what that might be like. What I'd like you to do is take a memory of going food shopping, for example. Now, I'm not talking about the monthly shop, because that'll take you 20 minutes, half an hour, or even longer, depending on how long it takes you to do your shopping. But what I would like to do is get you to run a little movie in your head of you maybe popping into the corner shop to pick up a pint of milk or a loaf of bread or something. And then what I'm going to do is guide you to run the movie on a particular way. So it's not a significant memory. It just is going in the shop. And as long as that's not traumatic for you, then you'll be fine. If it is, then obviously don't use that movie. Okay, so if you're ready, we're going to do it. Now, please, 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 if it isn't safe for you to do this, please don't. If you're operating machinery, driving a car, or could put yourself at any other risk by closing your eyes and doing this, then now's not the time to do it. So stop the podcast and come back and finish the episode when it is safe to do so. Assuming that it is safe for you to do this, then what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to close your eyes. And what I'd like you to do is think of that moment when you went to get that pint of milk in the local corner shop. And I'd like you to put that movie on the screen in front of you. Now, I'd like you to just allow the movie to play forward. I'd like you to do the following. I'd like you to make it black and white. I'd like you to make it so that you can see yourself in the movie, and I'd like you to run the movie forwards at normal speed. Ready, go. Now, as soon as you get to the end of the movie, and I'd like you to stop and open your eyes, depends how big the shop is. Okay, and when you get to the end of the movie, clear the screen and open your eyes. So that's an example of running a movie in a disassociated way. So you see yourself in the movie. We make it black and white to take the sting out of it if we were actually working on something proper. Obviously, we weren't today, but if we were. And then what we would do now, if we were actually running the fast phobia models, we'd now run the movie backwards in a very different way in order to do that. And this process of running the movie forwards and backwards in these two different ways, forward one way, back in a different way, means that those negative emotions get rubbed off. And it's really quite as easy as that. So hopefully that's given you a little experience of what it might be like if you were ever to have someone help you using the fast phobia model. Now, I'd like to introduce you to one of our students called Gaynor. Now, Gaynor had a problem driving over bridges. And I remember having her in the NLP training room. And I remember asking her, on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is highly traumatic and 0 is a non-entity, what number would she put on it? And she said 8 out of 10. And I remember saying to her, wow, that's going to cause you a problem given where we live with all these valleys and bridges. So what happened was that we then decided to run the process on this fear or phobia, whichever you'd prefer to call it, of bridges. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cut down to some footage from Gaynor, where she's going to run the process. Now, the great thing about the fast phobia is once I had helped her to get rid of her phobia of bridges, it was actually relatively easy to actually install a different strategy, which we went on to do afterwards. But anyway, let's go to the training room and see what happened with Gaynor. So what are you like on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is the most traumatic and 0 is a non-entity, if you have to drive over the Severn Bridge, how's that for you? An 8 out of 10?
Oh yeah.
That's going to cause you a significant problem. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to teach me how to do this bridge thing.
As come up to a bridge,
Yeah.
it's my hands start to sweat. Turn the music up. Yeah.
Do you remember the time when you have done it the worst, as in it's the most...
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
So we'll use that movie then, all right?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, good stuff.
So on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is highly traumatic and 0 is a non-entity, where are you now? 0! Yay! Oh, I can't believe that works. It's amazing.
It was brilliant working with Gaynor. I mean, I remember she popped into the training room not long after we'd done that and said, driving over bridges, Laura? Nah, no problem. She had it all under control. So thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope that you have enjoyed hearing about the possibility of being able to help people in a very comfortable, content-free way get rid of fears and phobias that may be causing them problems from the past. If you'd like to undertake some of our free NLP training, you're very welcome to sign up for that. If you go to unleashyourpotential.org.uk/free, you will be able to access 6 training videos, which I have done, which are packed full of things that you can do, as well as a few other bits and pieces that we've thrown in as freebies for you. So feel free to do that. If you haven't yet subscribed, please make sure you do that so that you know when we next release an episode. Thank you for listening and take care, and I'll see you on the next episode.